We got sweeping support changes and a bit more in the Feudal Fables update. There is no new champion this patch. Instead, there is a significant rework to an existing champion. Moji is going from the flank to the support class. I'm going to save my thoughts on her for a future video, so for now let's waste no time and hop straight into balance. First up, the item store. Armor plating's price is going up from 275 to 300 credits per level. Fair, as it's the safest item in the game. Lethality is getting a nice duration increase, going from 3.5 seconds to a full 5 seconds. Lethality's effects have to be noticeable if it's to compete with items that are active at all times. I think 5 seconds will be very fun to play around with on certain champs. Might have to do a coordinated strats for that soon. Last up, Sentinel is getting a price decrease going from 225 to 200 credits. This might incentivize players to buy it for the shield rather than just countering knockbacks. The general theme of this patch is rebalancing the support role. Overall, the supports are losing a bit of healing, but gaining a bit of damage. First up is Corvus. The fire rate on the officer's pistol is going from once every 0.07 seconds to once every 0.075 seconds. However, the damage per bullet is going from 74 to 75. This is overall a DPS decrease, with the officer's pistol now dealing 1000 DPS, down from 1057. It's very light, but this change is just weird. Like, who is out here complaining about Corvus's damage potential? Also, if you want to return his DPS to 1000, why not just revert his damage back to 70 a bullet, instead of messing with the fire rate? Besides this, the burst heal from Abyssal Reconstruction is being lowered from 800 to 700. This means that the burst healing for marked allies goes down from 920 to 805, which feels awful. These Corvus changes give me a good opportunity to address my thoughts on these support changes as a whole. As of right now on live, I do agree with the devs that certain supports can feel ridiculous to fight, often due to having insane healing numbers. But there is a pretty significant power disparity amongst supports right now. If I were to mock up a tier list of supports right now on live, it looks something like this. Supports with high healing, good damage, and utility take the top spots, while champions with low healing and utility take the lower spots. Corvus, in my opinion, is not the best support on live. His heals can be very inconsistent as they depend on being marked or not, and while his DPS potential is high, it often doesn't come into play enough due to how often Corvus has to use Abyssal Reconstruction to heal his allies. While Corvus has some utility, it is quite pathetic when compared to others in the support roster. You can grant allies 15% lifesteal or move speed with Mark, and you can grant a whopping 4% damage reduction with Reconstruction. Wowzer Max! The main way to provide good utility to your team with Corvus is by using the Dark Gifts talent. But that talent is highly underplayed because Corvus struggles to sustain a whole team if he isn't running double marks via spreading influence. And that brings me to another critique to these sweeping support changes. Not all, but a lot of supports have either a required talent or required loadout cards to achieve baseline power. In Corvus's case, you want to run spreading influence for the reasons mentioned prior. If you play Grover, you want to run the Verdant Expanse card capped. If you're Lilith, you want Blood Cannon capped. If you're Jenos, you want Astral Cycle and Retrograde in your deck. If you're playing Maldamba, you really want to run Spirits Chosen as your talent. With Pip, you want Medicinal Excellence, and so on and so forth. I'd be fine with baseline healing nerfs across the support role if it meant that they received quality of life buffs, such as by placing certain aspects of required builds into base kit. Of the supports I listed, only one of them is getting such a change. So yeah, not a fan of this Corvus change. Since he's already an underperformer, I think leaving him untouched would have been fine. In general, all of these supports are losing healing while gaining damage, but Corvus loses out on both fronts. Okay, next up is Furia. Pyreblade's damage is returning to its pre-keyword days, with the damage per shot going from 315 to 330. The damage per orb from Wings of Wrath is going up as well, seeing an increase from 200 to 300 damage. But Kindle's Soul's heal over time is being lowered from 400 to 300. Damage on the Pyreblade going back up is fine. It's been 330 for so long, I don't really take issue with it. However, the buff to Wings of Wrath, I'm not a fan of. Now, the auto-aim Orbeez will be dealing 900 damage, up from 600. That's almost half of a flank's HP. Pyre Strike reset builds are looking to be even more frustrating next patch, with Furia taking out a good chunk of health with each dash. Last up, the nerf for Kindle Soul. It's fine. It's a small difference, and the main aspect of the heal is through the initial burst, while the heal over time acts as a buffer. Do remember, the old Cherish went into base kit, so Furia has that going for her as well. Unfortunately, no tweaks to address how crazy good Solar Blessing is this patch. I personally don't see Furia losing her S tier status next patch. Next up is Grohk. Lightning Staff starting damage is going from 65 to 70, but the healing totem's heals per second is going down from 380 to 325. Again, damage is fine. Grohk's had higher damage in the past, but for a deployable healer, I feel that 325 health a second is so low, especially on front lines. I know Grohk tends to sway pretty violently in terms of meta viability, but I personally wouldn't lower totem healing so much. Maybe 350 heals per second. It's still a stationary deployable that can be destroyed or spammed out. Next is Grover. Keywords are getting the boot from his talons, praise Jenos. The throwing axe is seeing a damage increase. Base damage is going from 350 to 385, and the max damage over distance is going from 700 to 770. Crippling Throw is seeing a 25 damage increase as well. As for the throwing axe changes, I actually quite like them, especially the base damage buff of the axe. If you flank Grover, it is usually game over for him due to how little damage the axe does up close. While the damage increase is quite light, it could help Grover to be a little less pathetic up close. As for the Crippling Throw, I'd rather not touch its damage, but it's in line with other support changes, so whatever. Now onto Grover's healing nerfs for Blossom. The passive healing is going down from 75 a second to 70 a second. That's such a petty change, I'm not a fan of it. On top of this, the activated heals from Blossom are getting chopped down too. The burst heal is going down from 600 to 500, while the heal over time is going up from 285 to 350. Now the ability will heal 850 over its duration, instead of 885. Burst healing is always going to be better than heals over time, so for me, this is a pretty significant nerf. Personally, I would have rather seen Blossom go back to a single, but higher burst heal. Next is Io. For damage, the light bow is seeing an increase going from 400 to 425 damage. Guardian Spirit, aka Luna, is seeing damage increases on the first and second hits of the combo. That's going up from 180 to 200 each. Now the full combo will deal 750 damage, up from 710. Additionally, Luna's stun cooldown is going down from 18 to 15 seconds. The ultimate Begone will also be seeing a damage increase, going from 800 to 1000. However, these buffs come at a cost of Moonlight's healing, going down from 1000 heals per second to 900 heals per second. Ugh, we're back at that 135 a tick again. Personally, I would have swiped the 100 heals per second from Luna, while keeping more healing power on Nio herself. But overall, I do like this set of changes. This is what I was talking about earlier, sacrificing some healing on these supports in exchange for quality of life buffs. Luna's stun at 18 seconds makes it one of the longest cooldowns in the game. 15 seconds makes it more reasonable, and the extra chip damage from Luna will aid Isle's team over time. The buff to Begone is whatever, it doesn't fix a single issue the ult has, but bigger numbers are better. Next up is the winner of the patch in my eyes. That spotlight goes to Jenos. First up, buffs for the Astral Mark. The cooldown is going down from 7 to 6 seconds, and the duration is going up from 11 to 12 seconds. There are also two significant card reworks to Astral Mark. First is Astral Cycle. The old one increased the duration of Astral Mark. The new one grants 4% scaling move speed to marked allies for 6 seconds. Then there's Retrograde. The old card reduced the cooldown of Astral Mark, while the new card grants a 40 health scaling shield to allies for 4 seconds when using Astral Mark. This is what I'm talking about in terms of quality of life revamps for supports. Jenos on Live is the worst support right now, due to his low healing and lack of utility. He also suffers from required loadout syndrome, with the old Retrograde and Astral Cycle being the primary culprits. Now, Astral Mark has a reasonable cooldown and a mighty long duration at base, and Jenos gains access to light utility via cards. These changes should bridge the gap between him and the top tier supports. Oh yeah, that's not it for Jenos. Binary Star is getting a damage buff, going from 360 to 400. Very nice for those DPS Jenos players out there. And Void Grip now deals 200 damage on cast, but its damage over time has been reduced from 360 to 200. This last one is kind of a whatever change, but it does give you some guarantee when you use Void Grip now. At the very least, you can confirm 200 damage with the ability. Okay, next up is the Butchering of Lilith. Oh boy, there's a lot here. Base HP is going from 750 to 500. Blood health goes down from 2,500 to 2,000. Overall, Lilith's health pool goes from 3,250 to 2,500. The self-healing from Blood Hex has gone up from marking enemies, but gone down from marking allies. The damage from Blood Hex goes up 0.5%, but the healing on allies goes down. To compensate, Lilith gains 750 blood health when a marked ally gets in a limb. The Swarm is seeing damage and healing go down across all stages, but the blood cost now scales with charge, taking 500 for stage 1 and then 800 for stage 3. The blood cost on Deathwings is going down from 350 to 280, and last up for the base kit, the Heart of Crimson deals 25 more damage. On to loadout cards. Blood Cannon is getting a rework. The old one granted you 200 blood health per level, while lowering your base health by 75 per level. The new one increases your blood HP by a flat 50 per level. Enriched Blood. The old one increased the damage and healing of Swarm, but decreased its duration. The new card increases the duration of Swarm by a flat 0.25 seconds scaling. Overflowing Delight is losing the penalty of increased blood cost. Now it just flat out increases the radius of Swarm by 2% scaling. Symbiotic Relationship. The old one increased the healing allies receive from Swarm, but upped its blood cost. The new one grants allies 5% scaling lifesteal while standing in Swarm. Last card rework is for Wings of Terror. The old card increased the lateral distance of Deathwings. The new one increases the radius of Deathwing Stomp by 8% scaling. Last on the chopping block for Lilith is the deletion of the Cursed Accord talent. The old talent decreased the blood cost of abilities by 35%. It also increased the healing of Swarm by 15%, and the healing of Blood Hex by a flat 15. However, your damage was cut by 25%. The new Cursed Accord allows your blood health to regen out of combat, and it's gained twice as fast. My goodness, that was a lot. So in my opinion, Lilith did bring on the healing creep that we've seen in this game since her release. Her numbers on live are quite insane. Personally though, I don't think Lilith is a problem. She has high healing and survivability, sure, but outside of a speed boost card, she has no utility. So I'm not sure why she's being butchered so heavily and losing her identity completely. In my opinion, Lilith's identity is her high health pool, which stems from her give and take design. Next patch, both of these are gone. Overall health is being cut by 750, and if you run Blood Cannon capped, because let's face it, it's a card of required loadout syndrome, you're going from 3,625 health to 2,750. That's nearly a 900 health difference, or the equivalent of 1 Swarm or 2 Deathwings. As for the give and take, well, it's still there for abilities, but now it's mostly give with little take. If you use a fully charged Swarm, it will take roughly a third of your health, and puts you at 1,950 health next patch. Keep in mind next patch, you also have slower self-healing, so this is even more dangerous. On top of this, many of Lilith's loadout cards are becoming incredibly boring next patch, with just flat bonuses. Listen, I'm not the biggest fan of the give and take philosophy, but I respect it, as it's core to Lilith's identity. Come next patch, what is the point of Lilith? Tell me, why would you pick this support over anyone else? She has no identity. Oh yeah, the new Cursed Accord. Listen, I know I've made the joke before that Lilith is the only champion I'd like to play without a talent, but I didn't think the devs would take that seriously. This new Cursed Accord is trash. Seriously, why take this? The main upside this talent provides is already provided by a cheap meditation purchase from the store. The old Cursed Accord wasn't my favorite, but it did act as training wheels for newbies on Lilith, or those who wanted to max her healing potential. If I were in charge of balancing Lilith, I would keep her tankiness and give and take philosophy intact, aka not touching health or loadout cards. However, I do think lowering her healing output would ease up on community frustrations. Alternatively, if we want to lean into the tankiness of her, we can lower her damage output. My balance for Lilith would not be a deletion of the champ. Yeah, I really don't like these Lilith changes at all. I'm dropping the champion if these go to live. Next up, Maldamba. Real quick, damage on Cobra is going up by 25. Heal length on Spirits is being partially reverted, going up from 2 to 3 seconds. Also, the cooldown of Spirits is going from 3 to 2.5 seconds. Maldamba continues to eat good with each patch. While the duration increase to spirits is technically a nerf, it does give your allies some leniency to break cauterize to capitalize on the heal. Damage is nice too, but I think the biggest buff here is to mending spirits cooldown. While small, a half a second is almost the equivalent to Chronos 2 on live. Also, if you miss spirits, you will now only have to wait half a second to try again. Next is Pip. Keywords are being booted from his talents Praise Jenos. Combat Medic won't dominate early game as much anymore. Without compensation, it really goes to show you how Pip was already fine balance-wise before the keywords nonsense. I quite like these changes, as the keywords made Pip infuriating to fight for me personally. Next up is Rei. Damage on Sigil goes up by 25, but healing on Chain Heal takes a hit, going from 600 to 550, and 780 to 715 on linked allies. In terms of losing healing, Rei actually gets the light end of the stick, which I think is fair, due to her struggling to keep up in the late game. The extension talent is also being reworked. The old talent increased the range of Chain Heal bounces. The new talent, Ambidextrous, grants Chain Heal a second charge, but it moves 25% slower. Personally, I'm not a fan of that, as I feel the Chain Heal already moves quite slow. But the uptime you can have on Chain Heal is insane with this talent, especially if you buy Chronos. Keep in mind, more Chain Heals convert into more self-healing for Rei herself. One nitpick I have with this talent though, is that you can't use both Chain Heals back to back. You have to wait for your first one to expire before using the second. I think it would have been more interesting, and quite funny, to see two Chain Heals bouncing around at the same time. Other than that, this is going to be Rei's Healbot talent. While they're not my favorite, I think each support should have a talent like this. Next is Seris with more buffs. Rensoul. Damage per stack is going up from 90 to 100. At 4 stacks you deal 400 damage, up from 360. Fine, whatever. Convergence. Now deals 200 damage, up from 10. Okay, fine, whatever. Restore Soul. Now grants Seris 20% damage reduction during its duration. Are you kidding me? So while all the other supports are losing healing, Seris, who is the contender for healing so much, especially with her unnecessary buff to Restore Soul's healing a few patches ago, is keeping her healing numbers the same. Really? And Restore Soul now giving damage reduction? Like, why? Is she not tanky enough with Soul Collector? Like, why are they doing this? Ah, I see. We're trying to shove Seris into the rank scene again. Listen, not every character has to be good in the rank scene. First of all, I don't know why we pander so much to the ranked players when they're probably the smallest bunch of the player base, and Paladins has zero pro scene. But also, because of this philosophy, Seris has been getting buff after buff, and frankly, none of these buffs will aid Seris in the rank scene, because the issue ranked players have with her is that she can't do anything while healing or using her movement skill. And you know what? Unless you drastically rework Restore Soul to allow Seris to shoot while healing, which would be a beyond idiotic change, that weakness is not going away. And that's fine. Personally, I think Seris is the best support in a casual setting. She's one of the easiest to play, has good damage and great survivability via Soul Collector, got the old Agony Stun put into base kit, has insane AoE healing via Restore Soul, and has one of the stronger ults in the support class. These changes are going to do nothing for Seris in the rank scene, while simultaneously making her more overtuned in the casual setting. I thought the goal of this patch was to lessen support power creep. Last of the support changes is to Ying. Illusory Mirror's damage per shot is going up from 90 to 100, meaning that it now deals 500 per burst. Comboed with Focusing Lens, and that could be quite potent. Illusion's healing is going down from 450 per burst, back to 400 per burst. No, we fought for so long to buff the healing past 400, and now we're back at it. Ying Illusions felt perfect at 450. Oh, that's so frustrating. Also, Life Exchange's heal is going from 800 to 700. It was 700 for so long, I think the Healbot Ying players will live. This talent really should go to base kit though. To reiterate, I'm okay with most of these support changes. I would have preferred to see a few more quality of life buffs by addressing necessary builds and loadout cards. But alas, that didn't happen. The healing overall isn't going down much. In general, most supports are losing at most 100 heals per second. But this should help to speed the game up a smidge in the early game, while also giving supports a bit more self-defense thanks to their damage buffs. Personally, I don't think the difference will be that noticeable. Outside of the support rebalancing, we have tweaks to 3 champions. First is Skye seeing a nerf to Smoke and Dagger. The base healing is going from 150 to 100. Now when you have healing vapors capped, let's be honest, you're throwing if it's not capped in your build. Your heals per second will be 412.5, down from 462.5. I understand this talent can be very strong with the right team, so I do think nerfing it is fair. However, I would have rather seen a nerf to Skye's wrist crossbow damage when using this talent, as the heals per second are already on the low side. Maybe lowering the damage to 115 a shot like they did during Season 7 initially. Next up is Omen. Aphotic Reaver is seeing some fixes to its falloff and damage potential. TLDR, your damage should be more consistent now. To compensate, the Aphotic Reaver had its damage lowered from 500 to 450 per shot. Fair, as it already had one of the higher DPS potentials in shotgun mode. Gravity Vice now applies a 0.3 second cripple upon hit. While small, I actually think this grants an extra layer of potency to the ability. The intended purpose of this cripple is to prevent the lockout animation bug. But yeah, I got that bug during my Omen game on PTS. Last up, buffs for Umbral Lance. The bonus accuracy has been upped from 50 to 70%, and the fire rate penalty is gone. Now the gun fires at the same tempo as in Tumbra mode. Actually, the talent now is pretty much a revert to the initial Umbral Lance. Obviously a bit worse since more got reworked, and you deal with a bit of spread now. While this is nice for the talent, I'm very disappointed that Omen's other 2 talents have gone untouched. Umbral Lance is once again going to be the meta pick for Omen. Don't worry, I got an Omen rework concept in the works. Last up we have Sati, who is seeing a mini rework to her Tricks of the Trade passive. The passive generation of pips is going up from once every 2.65 seconds to once every 3 seconds. But now, Sati can generate 1 pip for every 3 gunshots she lands. Additionally, the old fire rate bonus provided by having 4 pips or higher is in the base kit, regardless of pip count. I'm not sure if this means that the speed boost when below half pips is still here or not, as that's not mentioned in the patch notes. To adjust for the new passive, Sati's Ricochet now costs 3 pips, up from 2, and Blastback now costs 5 pips, up from 4. On top of this rework to the passive, Sati's hand cannon has its effective range upped from 80 to 90, and its max range upped from 190 to 225 units. Overall, this makes Sati more lethal at range. Last up for Sati is another rework to the Heads or Tails talent. The old one allowed Ricochet to hit 2 enemies at once. The new one lowers the cost of Ricochet to 2 pips, and it now generates 1 pip for 4 hits on the coin. I'm really surprised these Sati changes have seemingly gone under the radar, as in my opinion, this is a pretty drastic nerf for the champ. The new pip generation is fine. In the right scenarios, you could be generating 1 pip every second, which is significantly faster than before. Being as Sati's abilities are fairly low impact, I think having them up more often is a plus. But the increased pip cost concerns me, mainly on Blastback. No longer can you chain 2 Blastbacks together, which was a key retreating strategy for Sati. Also, the coin costing 3 pips is a joke, as it's rarely used. And as for this new talent, it's laughable. You spend 2 pips to get 1 back. The old talent was annoying due to ultimate spam, so instead of addressing that, we just scrapped the idea altogether. I feel that Sati is a champ that the devs just lost their focus on completely. She released strong, had nerfs, and is now in this awkward forgotten phase. Besides the weapon buffs, I wouldn't be touching Sati. Alrighty, that's where I'm gonna leave this patch review. What do you guys think? Let me know down below. Don't forget to clap that like button and laser down that sub button. Snatching the bell is also a great way to stay in the loop. Also, make sure to stay tuned for my thoughts on the Moji support rework. As always, I'm YellowNinja, and peace.